All right, good afternoon or good morning, everyone. Hope everybody had a safe and dry weekend. We're going to look at the final recommendations for the General Government Subcommittee of Appropriations, and I bring the committee's attention to audits and accounts.
What page, Mr. Chairman?
I knew that was going to be the first question. Five. 4.3.1 is $20,000 to comply with House Bill 87, the Immigration Enforcement Review Board. Next change will be on page 6, the State Accounting Office, 11.1.1. This was a $140,000 elimination for the Carl Vinson Institute. We disagree with that. They're going to get rid of, I believe, the pair portion of that training, which is a $40,000 cut, leaving Carl Vinson with $100,000. Next is page 7, Administrative Services. 12.9.1 and 12.9.2 is $114,000 roughly combined for House Resolution 1180, someone who's wrongfully imprisoned, and House Resolution 1161, which is an injury compensation. Next, 12.10.3 under the Office of State Administrative Hearings. This is 41% used to calculate the benefits for the tax court. That 41% is part of the benefit package there for the tax court pursuant to House Bill 100, which we passed this session. Next will be on page 9, Banking and Finance Department, 14.3.3. That was a vacant position that was offered, and we took it. The Banking and Finance, by the way, did not get the full 2% cut that a lot of other agencies seem, given the uncertainty of the banking and mortgage situation in the state right now. Next on page 10, 20.2.2 under driver services. That is a $140,000 reduction in operations, which is about a 0.3%, 0.03, excuse me, of that particular cut there.
Did that close anything, or just
did not?
Reduce the
just reduced. Next is the Office of the Governor, 26.1.1 in the Governor's Emergency Fund. This is a revision because of lower interest rates, allows us to capture the savings that you see there. Governor's Office of Planning and Budget, that's a $200,000 add. The funds are used to help get the physical notes needed for the governor's office. Next page, 26.9.5, is a pass on that the Senate took in 12 of $135,000. We're just rolling that into 2013 budget as well. Next is the Office of the Commissioner of Insurance under Fire Safety, 28.3.1. This is transferring 63 positions that originally were going to go from the Department of Labor to the Department of Ag. Instead, we're moving them to the Department of Insurance for inspectors. The 28.5.3 was appropriated in 12. This is $600,000 to help fund the inspectors. They said if we gave them the $600,000, then they believed that they could bring in enough money to continue paying that on their own, and so that's why we have that $600,000 there. Next is under the Department of Natural Resources, 33.3.1 under Environmental Protection. There was a nearly $500,000 elimination of 5 positions. We've chosen not to eliminate, put $600,000 to make sure that we maintain the minimum staffing levels. 33.5.2 under Historic Preservation. This was an elimination for the African American Heritage issue of $221,000. We disagree with that amount of cut and have instead offered half that much. Under Parks, Recreation, and Historic Sites, I bring your attention to 33.6.3, which is $266,000. This is to increase funds for your law enforcement career ladder. Next page, under Wildlife Resources, continuing under the Department of Natural Resources, 33.9.1 is a $333,000. This is moving positions forward from 11 to 12. It didn't make sense to fund them, from 12 to 13. Didn't make sense to fund them in 12 and not in 13. 13.9.4 is for the Wildlife Resources, again, to initiate a law enforcement career ladder move within the department. And no changes on the State Properties Commission, the Building Authority. I next bring your attention to the Department of Revenue. Under Customer Service, 41.1.3 is the elimination of the funding for the postage. That's a courtesy postage paid that they provide. That is a $385,000. That was offered by the department to the governor as part of their 2% reduction. Under the Department of Administration, that's a reduction of $64,000 for a vacancy. That also was offered by the department to the governor. We're going to take those funds as well. The Forest Land Protection Grant, 41.3.1, is a cut equal to the actual expenditures. That's how much they had left over from 12. We assume if nothing changes, the same thing can be taken in 13. If there's an adjustment, of course, that can be made in the supplemental. Continuing on revenue processing, 41.10.3. This is a $200,000 from expected savings within that department from consolidation of offices. And under 41.11.1, tax compliance, this is telling them that they don't necessarily have to use the FIFA funds for positions. Next is the Secretary of State. Should be page 20, I believe. 19, excuse me, on your document. 42.1.1, Archives and Records. That's a $67,500 add, and that will allow archives to remain open for an additional half a day. Next, under Professional Licensing Board, 42.5.2. This is funds for the Georgia Board of Pharmacy for their compounding exams that they must take. They've got a laboratory set up over at the University of Georgia, and that is part of the examination process there. 42.5.3. This is one-time funds for a survey required for the nurses licensing within the state. In the past, we've got to get a handle on exactly where the nursing shortage is. In the past, that has been a voluntary. They're going to update it and make it mandatory so they can get a handle on exactly where the shortages are within the state. That's a $27,000 one-time. add. Continuing under the Secretary of State's office within the Georgia Government Transparency and Campaign Finance Commission, you'll notice there that that is a one-time add of $250,000 to update websites as well as other IT improvements that is needed by that commission. No changes under Personal Administration or under the State Board of Workmen's Compensation. At this time, I'll take any questions. Chairwoman Smith.
I just want to make some observations in natural resources and the ethics area. I'm on page 14. And first of all, I appreciate the fact that we are trying to bring up to parity our law enforcement officers in the DNR, in Department of Natural Resources area. And I really do appreciate that. And let's see, the other area I was trying to look at is, that's the main one right there. And then on page 19, I'm at 42.9.2 at the bottom of the page. I was glad that we are responding to the needs for IT upgrades for the Georgia Government Transparency and Campaign Finance Commission. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Any other questions from members of the committee? Yes.
Thank you, sir. I just had a question on line 26.3.2, the addition of a contract. Do we know to whom this contract will be awarded?
At this point, we do not.
Okay. And then my second question is actually the page back, 20.2.2, the reduction in funds for operations for full service license issuance centers. Do we know if that will impact the ability to provide?
I'm sorry, what?
Line 20.2.2 on page 10?
Yes.
Do we know if that will impact the ability to provide free IDs for voters during this fiscal year?
I've been told that it will not.
Thank you.
Other questions? Representative James. That's correct. We're talking about the gratis printers. That is something that this committee added in the supplemental, as you're aware. It is my understanding that those negotiations are going on between the House and the Senate, and I'm remaining optimistic since it was this committee's recommendation. Absolutely. Thank you. Representative Pruitt.
Yes.
That's correct. Any other comments or questions? At this time, the chair will entertain a motion. Got a move to pass and a second.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, like sign.